The headlights barely cut through the white. It came down sideways that afternoon, thick, angry snow that erased the road, the pines, even the hood of the truck. The wipers groaned. The radio crackled with static and half sentences. Someone had called it an hours ago, 2 animals, maybe injured, maybe dead. Hikers had seen them from the trail, huddled near the base of a ridge where the forest opened into nothing. The rescue team didn't expect to find much. By the time they reached the back road, the wind had turned vicious. It screamed through broken branches and sent drifts tumbling across the asphalt like something alive. One of the rescuers, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and frozen fingers, stepped out first. She pulled her coat tighter and squinted into the storm. Her partner followed, flashlight swinging low across the snow. Over there. The beam caught something small. 2 shapes, pressed together in a shallow hollow beneath a fallen pine. They weren't moving. She knelt carefully, boots sinking deep, and brushed the snow away. Her breath caught. 2 bobcats, females, maybe, one curled tightly around the other, her body a shield against the cold. Their fur was matted, crusted with ice. Their ribs showed through like finger bones. She reached out slowly, half expecting them to be frozen solid. Then she felt it, a faint tremor beneath her glove. They're alive. Her voice barely made it past the wind, but her partner heard. He moved fast, pulling blankets from the truck, unfolding carriers with shaking hands. They worked in silence, lifting the first bobcat, light as kindling, and settling her onto thick fleece. The second one didn't resist. She didn't even open her eyes. But when they tried to separate her from the first, her body tensed. A low guttural sound rose from her throat. Not a growl, not quite a cry, something deeper. She wouldn't let go. They carried them both to the truck, wrapped together, breath visible in tiny clouds. The heater roared to life. The rescuers sat in the front, glancing back every few seconds, waiting for the worst, waiting for stillness. But the female kept moving. At first it was subtle, a shift of her hind legs, a tightening in her belly. Then her breathing changed, shallow, quick, deliberate. The woman in the passenger seat turned fully around, eyes narrowing. Something's wrong. What do you mean? Look at her. The bobcat's sides were heaving. Her mouth opened, lips pulled back, tongue dark against pale gums. A soft grunt escaped her, low and rhythmic, like effort measured in heartbeats. The rescuer leaned closer, hand pressed to the glass of the carrier. And then she understood. She's pregnant. The truck went quiet except for the engine and the storm. The man behind the wheel didn't say anything. He just pressed the gas a little harder, eyes locked on the road that wasn't there. The female shifted again, her body curling inward, legs trembling. She pressed her nose to the other bobcat beside her, the one still motionless, still barely breathing, and let out another soft grunt. Not pain, not fear, determination. She hadn't been shielding another bobcat. She'd been shielding her unborn kittens. The woman in the passenger seat felt something tighten in her chest, something old and familiar and impossible to name. She turned back to the windshield, blinking hard against the snow. The wipers kept beating, the headlights kept searching, and somewhere in the back of that rattling truck, beneath blankets that smelled like smoke and antiseptic, a wild mother prepared to give birth. Not because it was safe, not because she was ready, but because survival doesn't wait for permission. The truck pushed through the storm, carrying 2 lives that had already chosen to fight, and 3 more that hadn't even taken their first breath. By the time they reached the wildlife center, the snow had stopped, but inside that carrier, the labor had just begun. The exam room smelled like cedar and disinfectant. They laid her on a heated pad, her body still trembling from the cold, from the effort, from something deeper. The younger bobcat, her companion, was placed in an adjacent enclosure, close enough to see, close enough to hear. She paced immediately, low chirps rising from her throat, eyes never leaving Mara. The team moved quietly, warm towels, IV fluids, threaded carefully into her foreleg. A stethoscope pressed gently to her belly, counting heartbeats that weren't hers. 3, maybe 4, someone whispered. Mara's breathing quickened, her sides rippled beneath matted fur. She didn't growl, didn't fight. She just curled tighter, instinct older than language guiding her through what came next. The rescuers stood back. There was nothing left to do but wait. Minutes stretched, the room filled with held breath and the soft hum of heating lamps. The younger Bobcat stopped pacing. She pressed her nose to the wire mesh, ears flattened, watching. Then a sound, small, wet, fragile. A kitten. Mara turned immediately, tongue rough and certain, cleaning away the membrane, nudging the tiny body until it gasped and mewed. It was no bigger than a fist, eyes sealed shut, paws like soft stones. One of the rescuers exhaled, hand over her mouth, then another kitten, then a third, all alive, all breathing. Mara gathered them close, her body curving around them like a fortress. Her exhaustion was visible, every breath labored, every movement slow, but her eyes were sharp, alert. She licked each one in turn, over and over as if counting. The room was silent, except for the faint mewing and the hum of the lamps. No one clapped, no one spoke. They just stood there, watching a wild mother do what she'd been prepared to die doing. The younger Bobcat finally settled, lying down across from the enclosure, chin resting on her paws. Her eyes stayed open, watching, guarding. One of the rescuers, a man in his 60s who'd seen 100 births and 1,000 rescues, wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and walked outside. He stood in the cold air, looking up at the stars that had finally broken through the clouds. Inside, Mara shifted slightly, pulling her kittens even closer. She had been seconds from death in that snow, yet somehow, she had chosen life. Mara grew stronger, the hollows beneath her ribs filled in. Her coat, once brittle and dull, began to shine again under the warmth of the lamps and the quiet care of hands that never lingered too long. The kittens, 2 females and a male, opened their eyes to a world of straw and soft light, unaware of the storm that had nearly claimed them. The younger Bobcat, the one they'd found beside her, never left. The team had separated them at first, thinking it safer, but she paced endlessly, refusing food, her cries sharp and insistent. So they moved her closer, and the moment she could see Mara again, she settled. She would lie for hours at the edge of her enclosure, chirping softly, ears swiveling at every sound the kittens made. The rescuers began calling them the Snow Family. They watched as Mara taught her young how to stalk a length of rope dragged across the floor, how to flatten when startled, how to climb the low branches they'd brought in from the forest. The kittens tumbled and pounced, clumsy and fearless, while their mother watched with eyes that missed nothing. The staff started visiting more often, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to. There was something about this family that felt different, sacred almost. But as the kittens grew, so did the truth no one wanted to say aloud. They couldn't stay. The team began moving them to a larger enclosure, one with dirt and fallen logs and open sky above mesh walls. It was meant to teach independence, to remind them what wild felt like. Mara adapted quickly. She showed her kittens how to dig, how to hide, how to wait in stillness. But sometimes, late in the evening, she would pause near the gate and look toward the building where the humans worked. Her gaze wasn't dependent, it wasn't pleading, it was understanding. One of the rescuers, a woman who had pulled Mara from the snow that first night, stood outside the enclosure one evening, watching the kittens chase each other through the grass. Mara sat nearby, tail flicking slowly, eyes half closed in the fading light. The woman pressed her hand to the mesh. Mara didn't move closer, but she didn't look away either. Some bonds, the woman thought, aren't meant to be broken, only honored. I believe there may be some confusion. I already generated Act 4 for you just above its 428 words and marked as complete. Here it is again for clarity. Spring came quietly. The snow that had buried them was gone now, replaced by soft green and the sound of water running over stones. The forest had thawed. The same ridge where hikers had once spotted 2 shapes in the snow now bloomed with wild flowers and new light. The rescue truck stopped at the edge of a clearing, engine ticking in the stillness. The team stepped out slowly. No one spoke. They opened the carriers carefully, one by one, and stepped back. Mara emerged first. She paused at the threshold, nose lifted, testing the air. Her ears swiveled, her eyes scanned the trees, the undergrowth, the sky. Behind her, 3 half-grown kittens pressed close, uncertain but curious. The younger bobcat, her companion, her guardian, stepped out last, moving to Mara's side as if they'd rehearsed it 100 times. For a moment no one moved. Then Mara looked back, not at the carriers, not at the truck, at the people standing there, hands in pockets, eyes wet, smiles small and trembling. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't goodbye. It was acknowledgement. She turned and without hesitation led her family into the trees. The kittens followed, their spotted coats flickering between shadow and sun. The younger bobcat stayed close, tail low, movements fluid and sure. Within seconds they were gone, swallowed by the forest as if they'd never left. The rescuers stood in the clearing long after the sounds faded. One of them, the woman who had pulled Mara from the snow, pressed her palms to her eyes and laughed softly, shaking her head. Another rested a hand on her shoulder. No words, just presence. Weeks later, a motion-triggered camera deep in the forest captured something remarkable. Mara, strong and sleek, leading her young through a meadow still wet from snowmelt. The kittens, no longer small, moved with confidence, heads high, bodies low when they stalked. The companion walked beside them, vigilant, calm. The footage played on a laptop in the wildlife center late one night. The team gathered around it in silence, watching the same scene loop 3, 4, 5 times. One of them smiled through tears. Another whispered, "She made it." She had been rescued once, pulled from death by human hands and human hope. But what she truly needed was not to be saved. It was to be given the chance to save her own. And she had.